what is enough? He said, John D. Rockefeller always knew what enough was. Just one more. And I thought, mother divine Jesus, that sums me up in one sentence. That is me. It was always going to be one more. I would rock back my seat. He then, the next sentence, he said, I'll talk about change. He said, nobody ever changed their life tomorrow. Today is the only day you can change your life. And as you know, Conor, with ADHD, there's only 2 time scales, now and not now. I literally was holding the seat, couldn't wait for him to finish the lecture.
Stewart Kenny, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
So,
Thank you.
So let's start with your childhood. Then, what it was like for you growing up, and just a bit about your family and all that kind of thing.
Well, my father was a very successful barrister and became a Supreme Court judge. And one of the things we're most proud of is he was appointed by Bobby Malloy to look into the price of building land in order to bring the price of houses down. Things don't change in the world, you know. And he came out with the Kenny, what is known as the Kenny Report on building land, which was a revolutionary thing at the time. That the state, he believed, even though he was a conservative enough man because he came from a building background, he believed that the building land was in fact the people's land. That why when the government zoned the land, built all the roads there, built all the sewerage, got the electricity, built schools, all those things, why should a private individual get all the profit? And this was being stolen from the people. And we were all a bit surprised because we wouldn't have thought he would go that far, but he saw a lot of what was happening, that the same people were turning up, buying land, and mysteriously seemed to know in advance, which of course the Mahon Tribunal, the Flood Tribunal, showed that was endemic in the system. So he said that the state should have a right to take over land that they were zoning for development, for housing development, at agricultural value plus a third. All the politicians said, oh, this is wonderful. And of course, as we know, they were all getting looked after by developers. So the only man who championed it was Dr. Noel Brown. And to this day, it is still being talked about. Why was it never implemented? And we now know because there's too many vested interests.
And still a bit relevant today, probably, Stewart.
Oh, it's very relevant today. And, you know, it's maybe I'm most proud about is that 50 years later, it was, I think it came out in 1972, so over 50 years later, it's still been quoted, but it was never going to happen. And it still should happen, but it won't happen. Ireland has a fascination with wealth and wealth creation, and there isn't a balance, in my view, between wealth creation and the public good. That's a bit rich coming from a bookmaker, I accept.
Well, you know, and I think we'll get to that because I think it's interesting. But just on this particular point, for Ireland specifically, like if you look to the States and Silicon Valley companies, for example, there is a focus, whether it's honest or legitimate or not, on kind of creating something that kind of betters the world for people, and wealth is kind of an extension of that. Do you think it's different in Ireland? Do you think the focus is the wrong way around?
Well, I think if you look at Meta and those firms, public good is so far down. Okay. Don't give me that one. No, I don't buy that at all. They know the damage that it's doing. How come they're the high up executives are sending their kids to schools where all smartphones, all screens are banned, but they are in a very devious and underhand manner making sure that every kid gets addicted to them, and So no, I don't buy anything in Silicon Valley. Now, look, I've been very lucky because I've invested most of my money when I flipped out of Paddy Power was put into three of the big seven: Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. But are they uh, are they doing anything for the public good? Not a bit. Look, it's like saying the bookies are really concerned about gambling addiction. They make a public statements. They're very good at the PR around it, and I was no different when I was running Paddy Power, so I'm not going to try and pretend I have regrets about that. But getting back to childhood, because the danger with having both of them ADHD, the danger of this is that we drift off. And I'm trying to be not quite the adult in the road. We won't say that. But my mum was a Methodist. She was a wonderful mother, but she was brought up in a Methodist Quaker start off and then a Methodist tradition. And it was only, and she was a wonderful mother and caring and very dutiful, and worried about the two of us all the time. And, it was only after she died when we read the Methodist Catechism. Drinking was bad. Whoring around was really bad. But gambling was the utter Satan. And yet she didn't stand in my way of becoming a bookmaker because she believes whatever makes us happy and achieve whatever we want to achieve in life, you must let them. She tried to discourage me, but so mildly, I wouldn't even call it discouragement. She said, "Would you not join the bank?" Well, the truth is, if I joined the bank, I would have probably been more likely to rob the bank than join the bank. And it was interesting on my dad's side. His father was a builder who built all the rise in Mount Merion, and it is with some pride that the family can say to this day, certainly Sherry Fitzgerald and quite a few of the auctioneers advertised them as Kenny built houses. He was really interested in craftsmen, in crafting something, but he had no interest in selling the houses. He just, once he'd moved on, so he went broke 3 times. My father, being the eldest child, obviously realised how much that stress. So it was interesting. He was always worried about he wouldn't be a person who took on big debt, and debt was dangerous. And to this day, a lot of things are discussed around the dining room table that you pick up and become truths in your life. But when I practiced as a psychotherapist, the next question I would always ask, first one was, what was talked around the dining room table? And the second question, when they'd answered, what was present at the dining room table that wasn't discussed? And in some ways, the fear of debt, not of death, of debt, the EBT, was discussed, but underneath the surface, there was a huge fear of getting into debt. And the first thing, when the three of us, David Power, John Corcoran and myself, and it was John Corcoran's idea, a wonderful man, and David was wonderful as well. But the first thing I was interested in doing was paying off the bank debt. I did not want it, and to build up a cash mountain.
But bookmaking, in a way, it's not debt, right? But in a way, there's kind of an element of that to it. Well, why did you become a bookmaker in the first place, and kind of how did that all happen?
I had serious asthma as a kid. And the wonder drug in those days was cortisone. They didn't say the side effects. And as an aside, my mum noticed at the age of 14, not only was I the smallest in the class, but I was by far the smallest in the class and wasn't growing. And she saw a son of a relative who hadn't grown at all, having taken cortisone, and she worried herself sick about this, and went to got specialist advice, and I was hauled in to the Children's Hospital, which was then in Harker Street, and spent the whole summer holidays there getting off cortisone. So I couldn't exercise because I had asthma all the time. So my dad was concerned I wasn't getting any fresh air. He asked his friends and they said, oh, bring him horse racing. And I saw the legends of the bookmaking ring. Sean Graham and Terry Rogers was the Red Devil, was wonderful entertainment. And they were loud and they were strong and there were bundles of cash at the centre of everything. And I thought, I want to be like that. And I wasn't really interested in becoming a horse race trainer or anything like that. This was the cut and thrust excitement. And as you know, with ADHD, it's all about the adrenaline kick, the excitement. So I wanted to become a bookie. Now, I had drive to beat the band. I was the smallest in the class. I didn't have a chip on one shoulder. I had a chip on both shoulders, perfectly balanced. And I was very chippy. I always wanted the David and Goliath. Malcolm Gladwell writes a wonderful book about the David and Goliath. I always wanted to be the David trying to slay the Goliath. And I know we've veered off a bit, but so immediately I formed Paddy Power. I wanted to take on Ladbrokes, who were the world's biggest bookmakers.
So you were obviously, I suppose, quite competitive, if you don't mind me using that word.
Yeah, more than competitive.
And was there a drive at that stage? Was there a drive for you to make money? I know you said debt was something that you were afraid of, but was there a security thing that you wanted to kind of make money or for any other reason?
There was a drive to get secure. And once I felt I was secure, that myself and my kids were secure enough forever, my interest in business waned pretty quickly.
Really? And I think it's interesting because most humans say they think, oh, well, we all do it, right? I think, oh, once I get to there, I'll be great. And then once I get to the next goal, I'll be great. And the goalposts keep kind of moving. So it is kind of rare to kind of accept that you have enough once you do have enough, if that makes sense.
Conor, I had an ambition to retire at 50 and go to Tibet at 50. I actually went to Tibet for 7 weeks. It wasn't 7 years in Tibet. I did 7 weeks at Tibet. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely magnificent. And I went into Kathmandu then and in Nepal. But looking back now, I could have just as easily been 60 and saying I'm going to retire at 50, and I could have been 70. And I went to a lecture by a fellow called Charles Handy, who has written many books, The Empty Raincoat and Humans. He died recently. Wonderful man, lovely man. And I didn't know why I was going to the lecture, but somebody gave me a present of the ticket. And I went, and he suddenly said, what is enough? He said, John D. Rockefeller always knew what enough was. Just one more. And I thought, Mother of divine Jesus, that sums me up in one sentence. That is me. It was always going to be one more. We've captured Ireland. Now we'll go on to the UK. And suddenly I would rock back in my seat. The next sentence he said, I'll talk about change. He said, nobody ever changed their life tomorrow. Today is the only day you can change your life. And as you know, Conor, with ADHD, there's only 2 time scales, now and not now. I literally was holding the seat, couldn't wait for him to finish the lecture. Went it out, rang up John Corcoran, who was the chairman of the company, said, I need to see you. He said, Saturday, Stewart, I'm watching the racing. John and myself were great, great friends, an inspirational man. Absolutely inspirational man for me. And I said, you're seeing me, I'll be in Tala in a half an hour. He said, all right. I went in and said, I'm leaving in a year. Bingo. And he took one look at me and said, I could see you mean it this time. And right, let's plan it. And being now and not now, I lost interest immediately. I hardly ever turned up at the office.
Yeah.
How they didn't fire me, I don't know. But anyhow, and it is that just one more was the thing. But I know all wealthy people say it's not about the money, but and I would say it's not, but it was about the money that I wanted to get comfortable
Mm.
and to have enough, and I have more than enough. Obviously, if I'd stayed on another 5 years, I'd have double enough. But I think of the words of Chuck Feeney, one of the world's most wonderful people, who gave all his money away. He said, "Look, you can't wear the two pairs of shoes at the same time." He said about traveling business class. Well, if it gets me there quicker, I'll go business class, but it doesn't. I have enough to do whatever I want. All I want is really good new bicycles. I don't have any instant cars. Don't really want to live in a huge big house. 5-star hotels I find too plush and for me. So I don't have that sort of lifestyle. I like good food, but I'm not going to spend fortunes. I was brought up, remember, by a Methodist and by somebody who had seen his father go broke. So we'd be careful. I collect my Tesco points. I know it's utterly ridiculous, some of the cost-saving measures I do, but that's who I am. So nothing gives me greater joy than cashing in my Tesco points. Well, that's an exaggeration. Of course, things do, but it gives me... It is... I don't like getting... I wouldn't be prepared to spend fortunes on a meal. I don't drink much any longer, but in my drinking days, and I drank too much in my day, of course, £100 bottles of wine just worked for me, because I usually would have had 3 pints beforehand, so there was no difference between a 15 quid bottle of wine and a £100 bottle of wine.
So it's fair to say that I suppose you didn't have it was a security ambition more so than a having far more to be able to live with it in extreme comfort. Take me back then to just the kind of formation of Paddy Power, and then that journey that you went on with Paddy Power, because you went from a kind of amalgamating a number of bookmaking shops to being by far the biggest in Ireland, and Paddy Power, the overall company now is probably one of the biggest of its kind in the world. So just talk to me a little bit about that journey and what that was like for you.
Yeah, Flutter is by far the biggest in the world. The journey was, I started on my own in 1972, I think it was, and I was 21 or 22. I had trained in Ladbrokes in London, but I'd always been fascinated by gambling from the age of around 14, 15, by gambling. I remember, when I was doing the leaving cert, I was the bookmaker in Glenstone. And when I was doing the leaving cert, the leaving papers were stolen that year.
Mm-hmm.
And the English was published in the Irish Independent before everybody went into the exam. So we went in, and obviously we had to repeat it, but it was on a Saturday. And it was the Irish Derby on that Saturday. And the honours was morning and afternoon. The pass was only in the morning. And I thought, God, Lester Piggott's riding, I think it was Ribofilio, in the Derby, in the Irish Derby. God almighty. And I switched from honours English to pass English. Lester Piggott finished second. I made a bundle. I can't remember who won the race. And so that was my attitude to education. And I don't know how I scraped through the leaving cert, got into college, did BCom for 2 years, but I had no interest. I was made racing correspondent of the UCD magazine, a magazine called Instead. I was given a press badge, and I never attended. But anyhow, I trained in Ladbrokes and then went on and set up my own shops. I then went with Jack Brown in Ireland, which is a new firm starting up, and then I set up my own 2 shops in Wexford Street and Athy. The first day I was betting on Nixon resigning from the White House, and I couldn't believe it. We got into the front page of both the evening papers. It was the Press and the Herald at the time. And I thought, God, this is Brit-free way of getting publicity. We did all sorts of things, betting on who shot JR in Dallas and making up stories and everything like that. Got on BBC. And I saw, and that was, if I brought one thing to bookmaking, I wasn't a brilliant bookie. It was marketing. Marketing was the thing I enjoyed most, and upsetting at the establishment. You know, Paddy Power, the Pope to join Glasgow Rangers, all those sort of ads about Oscar Pistorius, O.J. Simpson, and things like that.
Yeah, like I from your time, and obviously Paddy Power's marketing is infamous, really, for just being slightly on the line. But there was definitely a line at one stage, I think back in 2007, and I was with a group of friends, and someone thought they wanted to get a prize for Amy Winehouse dying. Now, look, this is I'm embarrassed to even say that I was involved in this conversation, but we thought, let's ring Paddy Power and see what they give us. And actually, they didn't give it. They said we wouldn't do something with such bad taste in it. So there was a line somewhere there. I don't know if it was ever written down or
no. Patrick Kennedy, who was the most inspirational CEO in Paddy Power, you say, look, we want to land on the edge, but unfortunately, eventually, if we want to land on the edge, the only way of finding the edge is by going over it all the time. So there are times. Now, you wouldn't get away with any of this stuff now. You know, Oscar Pistorius, money back if he walks, in the trial. And we thought it was that people would object on the basis that he was missing his legs, but in fact it was the violence against women. We landed just over the edge there. It was brought up in the House of Commons, they were betting on it. Now, any publicity is good publicity,
yeah.
But if you did something like that now, you would be Ratner Jewellery, the famous story of Ratner Jewellery, you know, where Jared Ratner joked at a dinner he was speaking at, you know, but they were eating prawn sandwiches or something like that. Well, our jewellery is worth less than a prawn sandwich, and the Sun headlined it, and the Ratner's closed. So you would be closed down. I mean, we cut corners all over the place, did things that were right on the edge, but you wouldn't be allowed to do any of it. We're so politically correct now. I mean, there was one we didn't go ahead with. It was, I thought, an inspirational one, brought up by a famous advertising agency in London, where you would, to show how easy it is to use the app, you would use somebody who had thalidomide arms, and if we had agreed with the Thalidomide Association of the UK, and they said, yeah, that's just what we want. We want to normalise those. So there's thalidomide comedians and things like that. What the chief executive at the time didn't have the balls that that most chief executives might have had in Paddy Power, and wouldn't go ahead with it because we had the backing of that would have been now it would be destroyed. I mean, you'd shut down the firm on the spot. But we had all the backing of to do it, and in fact, the actors who unfortunately for them, really unfortunate because it was a terrible thing, thalidomide. The thalidomide actors were really enthusiastic about it. This is using us in a way that we want, but we also want to be funny about it. But so you can't do any of that sort of thing now.
Yeah. Tell me about being the CEO, because you've referred to it already. You have ADHD, and you knew obviously you were good at marketing, and that's what you like doing, and anti-establishment and all that. But there's so much else that goes into being a CEO and managing a business of that size. Did you struggle at all with the kind of rest of the business, or maybe it was easier as it got bigger because you had more resources? Like, just talk to me a little bit about your kind of personal journey.
I was never a CEO. I'm song and dance and bullshit. I wasn't CEO. I could What I was good at was marketing and strategizing and seeing the way the public were going and seeing the change in the public and the change in the public attitude towards gambling. Those are the sort of things I was good at. But as for managing, I couldn't manage a piss up in a brewery. I mean, nobody would ask me to manage anything. I had inspirational people around me. Jimmy Mangan, the best person ever with people. And in those days, people was everything. We saw that was what makes a business. John O'Reilly, who did a lot of the organisation and did the finances. Roseanne Corcoran, John Corcoran's daughter, was inspirational at managing expenses to do with supplies, but also doing up the shops in a more modern way. We realised very quickly that the lotto was the only gambling that over 50% of the population did. Therefore, we must get in on that act and bet on it. And we came up with a really simple coupon that people that could use. And we had to redesign the shops because a huge amount of women were coming into the shops but having to walk through lines of men and they felt self-conscious because they didn't know how to bet. And we started putting the counter in beside the door so they didn't have to go through. All those sort of things. So I was blessed with the people around me. I was absolutely blessed. And John Corcoran was an inspirational chairman. He'd seen it all. He bought 20 fields in Blanchardstown and waited 20 years before Blanchardstown Shopping Centre. He thought long term. I remember going to him once and saying, I have a 7-year business plan. He said, Stewart, you think much too short term. Think for your grandchildren. Bring me back a plan for the grandchildren. What has changed in business now is chief executives don't think of the long term any longer. They only think of their pay packet. Basically, you see it, or they don't have, and that's why having a founder still involved in a business who it's their baby, so they're proud of it, they're prepared to sacrifice profits for long-term gain is always a huge benefit. So, if Jeff Bezos left Amazon, I would flood my shares on the day because the only man of the really big companies, Gates left a legacy. Most of the CEOs these days are thinking of their exit package. They last 8 years in the business, they're gone. And I was blessed to have worked with Patrick Kennedy, a man who didn't think like that, who thought of the long term. The chief executive, certainly the last chief executive that actually thought about gambling addiction in a really serious way, not just let's do the PR. So he was inspirational and of course has gone on to chair the Bank of Ireland and numerous other things. A real great guy.
What were some examples of long-term thinking when you were in Paddy Power, or even just one example of something that you kind of invested in, thinking that far out, thinking 10, 20 years out?
When I started in Paddy Power, it was only males who gambled. We were missing 50% of the population. So we realised that 50% of the people who played the lottery were women. So we got into lottery betting and made it so women-friendly by redesigning the shops. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands to redesign a shop just so it would be easier for them. And a lot of these things now of enticing people into gambling, I look back with regret and not huge pride. Also betting on things like The Simpsons and O.J. Simpson. You didn't take any bets on it, but it got your front page of the paper. You became the name, and it was building a brand for that will continue on in 20 years' time. I mean, there was a great story about The Simpsons. We had a young fella, Ben Jackson, and he put up odds on who shot Mr. Burns in The Simpsons. I'd hardly ever heard of the program at that time. It was only just getting going. All the odds were going down. Well, he was in a summer job, and we left the odds up on the internet. The internet was only an information thing at the time. We left the odds up. And then one day, the shop in Fermoy, the woman rang up and said, somebody's trying to get €20, or could have been pounds at the time, I'm not sure, on Baby Maggie at 500 to 1. And there have been students in all day putting £1 on Baby Maggie. I don't know how many pounds we have. And she counted up, and I think it was 28 quid. And we thought, oh, there's something wrong here. So it turned out it had been shown in the States the day before. The students had all got the information on the internet, which we knew very little about in time. And they are all, now most bookies would say palpable error, that it was an obvious mistake and the result was known. But I was able to see that this was an opportunity of getting relevant to a younger audience. As it turned out, too young an audience, and I put my hand up, but a younger audience, and we got front page of the paper that we made a complete and utter hames of it, and I said it was all my fault. I was responsible for it, and this is a question of university students realizing how the world was changing and using the new technology, and it was front page of all the papers. There was we paid out 14,000, I think, on a thing. We didn't have to pay it, but that was buying long-term benefit. When those students were 40, they'd still be thinking of Paddy Power.
So let's talk about just the kind of younger generation and targeting at that, because you said earlier you obviously have some regrets around gambling addiction, and I suppose people getting into it at a younger age is probably part of starting an addiction early. Just talk to me a little bit about that, what the mindset was at the time. Were you ignoring it, or were you just not as aware of the kind of future problem?
Plead guilty to them all of those days. Ignoring it, but not aware. We did not realize how addictive but especially the online. The online is where the issues are. Betting shops, there were addiction rates, but they were minor compared to, remember, the ESRI came out with a figure 3.3% of the population had problems with gambling now. That was about 0.3 in 1986 when Paddy Power was formed. The internet, by its very nature, the screens are so addictive, especially for ADHD people. But they are so addictive. We are realizing our children and our grandchildren should not have telephones too early. It distorts messages in the brain. So that is addictive, and the internet, by its accessibility and what the bookmakers were doing, which I should have seen and I didn't, the danger of pushing people from, you take an 18-year-old opening an account to have a bet on Manchester United, God help him, or leave that aside. Within 24 hours, the bookmakers are offering him now a free bet, free spins on the casino. That is taking a non-addictive product and pushing them towards a highly addictive. They know what they're doing now. Mm-hmm. They've got the research. They know they are willingly sucking people into an addictive product. Now, in the 2000s, when the internet was formed, people didn't realize the addictive nature of all these things. Now the bookmakers know about it. They're covering up. They know. And I would say to any parent, if your child or your 18-year-old opens an account with a bookmaker, he or she will be sucked into the online casino. The online casino rates, the online slot machines have the same addiction rate as cocaine. So if you believe that your kids should be taking cocaine at 18, go ahead. It is rather like a kid going in and for his first drink and having a shandy in a bar. And when he's finished the shandy, the barman says, here's a triple strength brandy on the house. Now that is what it is. So we know it. Now, of course, I should have been much more aware. People have a right to be pointing a finger at me. But we didn't, I'm not justifying anything I did, but now the bookmakers know the addiction rates of a cocaine-like product. It is the crack cocaine. Online slots are the crack cocaine of gambling. And, they are still sucking people, enticing young people in. That shouldn't be happening.
So regulation is probably the answer, because I don't know if the bookmakers are going to make this decision for themselves, because they're probably making too much money on it. Is regulation, did the government need to step in on this?
Yes, and the government have done a lot, and the Irish Gambling Commission and Marie Caulfield are aware of these things and are going to do things about it. Remember, the public good will never be looked after by businesses. Businesses are there to make profits. The public good will be looked after by the representatives of the public, namely the legislature and regulators. Expecting businesses who are driven by profit to look after the public good is utterly ridiculous. Legislation is the only one. We've had self-regulation. It led to the crash. It led to a lot more. Mm-hmm. It led to self-regulation, opioids in the Sackler family in the States. Opioids. And the Sacklers said it is exactly the same argument as the cigarette companies, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and the bookmakers use. It is not the product. It is the people. There are weak people out there, and that's all. We just have to weed them out. We now know that that's a load of bullshit. Mm-hmm. In fact, it is certain products are highly addictive. Now, I am not giving myself a carte blanche on this. I should have done a lot more. I did oppose fixed odds betting terminals, which were highly addictive coming into Ireland, but I didn't do enough. I should have done more. I have huge regrets, but I either shut up now or speak up on this issue, and this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, which will be dealt with soon enough, I believe. And there's a debate in Britain on this, tax rates on gambling. Now, I campaigned to bring them down 20% of the start of the campaign, all the way down to 1%. While betting on horse racing and football isn't too addictive, the online casino is highly addictive. In the States, the tax rates on certain products are 50%. We have a very low tax rate. It's 23. They just charge about 23% on the handle, the profit on online casinos. That is an area where, in order to discourage bookmakers sucking people, because they are all the time trying to get you, because they've no expenses. Once you set up an online casino, you've no more expense. You don't need anybody to run it. So they are trying all the time to get everybody to switch from horses and football to the online slot machines. The tax rate in that should be 50% to discourage, so that they keep gambling to what it is.
Sure. So, and as I just want to move on from business, because I know, as you said to me earlier, you've kind of lost your graw for it. And I'm interested in, because you became a psychotherapist pretty quickly after leaving Paddy Power. And I'm wondering, was that always there? Like, was that always in you to want to do it? Because the two worlds are so different, to being CEO of Paddy Power to being a psychotherapist. It's almost polar opposites. And I'm just wondering about that transition, how it came about, and was it kind of ever present the whole time?
Well, with ADHD and with being the smallest in the class and being so chippy, and my drive was abnormal, drive to succeed. I've done therapy in huge part of my adult life, nearly all my adult life, and I find it wonderful. And I was really interested in how the human brain works, how one can understand oneself and one's drives. So I always wanted to get involved in something like that, and therefore when I retired from Paddy Power, I qualified as a psychotherapist. And I remember the And I was still a spokesman for Paddy Power, even though I wasn't working full time when it came to politics, because politics, I'm a political junkie, totally and completely a political junkie, and love gambling on it. But so I was still a spokesman, and my first client came in, and I was so nervous because your first client, they were kind of holding the seat and trying to remember, page 43 says you should be relaxed and all those sort of things. And yeah, the poor woman, God, hope she has recovered from that session. And so I was all prepared for the second session, meditating beforehand, for the hour beforehand, everything. Everything was perfect. And the fellow walks in, he had just come back from London, so he didn't know me at all. And he said, I'm a compulsive gambler. Well, for all the good I did him, I would have been better off giving him a Paddy Power job. Third client lasted about 2 years with me, so I did get the message eventually. And being a therapist is very draining. And my father suffered from serious depression. And so I found when clients came in, a lot of them were depressed. I found it very draining. And after about 8 years, I switched to coaching. And then I coached for a bit. And then I switched to coaching ADHD. And coaching actually works better than psychotherapy with ADHD, because the way, as both of us know, that our life can become very easily disorganized, and then the stress and everything around that with ADHD. And it is, while psychotherapy is a good backup, clients make more progress with coaching, where it's more directive. It's kind of like CBT for ADHD.
And I mean, how old were you when you found out you had ADHD?
42.
So were you still in Paddy Power at that stage?
Yes, I was running Paddy Power. Yeah.
Okay, and was it? What was that like? Finding out for you, was it? I mean, surely it's a little bit like coming home, maybe. But what was it like to kind of get that diagnosis?
Well, for everybody around me, they saw the chaos. They didn't know what it was. They weren't psychiatrists, but it did explain a lot of things. Why I one day turned up in London for a meeting in Dublin. That sort of disorganization. Now everything I put into a diary with reminders and everything like that. And it's the only way. And the odd time of a cock up. I nearly missed talking to you today, by the way. So it was a relief, and it set me with Professor Michael Fitzgerald, who diagnosed me. He's written numerous books on it. He was wonderful. He diagnosed me after about a year's therapy. He said, do you ever think of ADHD? I said, I haven't a clue what it is. And he explained it to me. I said, oh God, that's me, all right. And it did, but I'm learning even to this day how it affects relationships. My kids have had to see it. They kind of shrug their shoulders, and they're used to the kind of manic activity, and quite like the kind of manic activity, and how, this weekend I'm 73 going on 74 next month. I'll try and cycle 160k over the hills of Beara with the Tour de Beara and things like that. God, I shouldn't have said that. No, I bloody do it. And I think they're kind of ticker pink with the, I have a new idea every day, and then I'll go and do the 312, which in Mallorca a few years ago, which is 312k around the island of Mallorca in a day, over every hill there. And so that sort of manic behavior, and I will arrive in to my daughter's home, say, I've got a new idea, and bring the kids, the grandkids around, and tell them the new idea I have, and they're kind of looking up there, and here he goes again. But that's fine. That's me. And it's hard for people to live with me, you know. But my son Nicky and my daughter Camilla and my eldest grandchild Shade, who is now a mummy, Reggie, uh, have kind of got used to it and tolerated, and at times are tickled. I hope are tickled pink with it.
Well, I think family can be a bit more supportive and understanding. But I'm still just thinking, because I think of maybe what my like least uh, a job for me, with balancing so many things and having to wear so many hats, like being CEO of a company like that, and just having huge responsibility. That would be just when I think about my particular where I am on the spectrum with ADHD. When I think about that, I just think that would be an absolute nightmare for me, and perhaps I'm kind of wondering, did you have challenges when you were in that role because of your ADHD? I know you said you showed up for meetings in London that were in Dublin and things like that, but I suppose, did it cause you any stress at the time? Were colleagues kind of, taking you aside and saying that this isn't, this isn't good enough? Or what was that kind of like before you kind of found out what it was?
Well, I suppose I was quite dominant at the beginning because I was one of the three founders, and the enthusiasm I brought some days I'd be coming in a bit hangdog, and other days I'd be running up the stairs, running into the trading room, jumping up on chairs, like, this is going to be it. Give it out. And they'd be all looking at it, but they'd smile, and it was. And, they knew my passion for customer service. They knew if a customer is 1% right, he's 100% right. There's only one way of solving a customer service issue. You must do it immediately, because otherwise he's sold a story in the pub that night. You must do it, and don't ever split the difference. If the customer is even 10% right, give him double of what he was looking for. He will become an advocate for you. And those are that I was really passionate. And they knew, because I had been a bookie for so long, I understood I understood the customer journey, because I'm a punter. I love gambling. I still love gambling. I'm not anti-gambling when I say about gambling addiction. No, I'm far from it. All I'm anti is the way the online casino should have such high health warnings, just as high as cigarettes. It is the new cigarettes. And it should be taxed like cigarettes, the online casino. I don't believe gambling tax should go up, but I do believe the online casino, because our psychiatric hospitals will get more and more and more gambling addicts. As it is increasing quite dramatically.
What about the transition then to psychotherapy? There must have been a moment, and you said you were at the lecture, for example, and was it kind of building up that you wanted to get out, and this lecture was the thing that did it for you?
Yeah, I'd had enough. I'd done what I want to do. It was becoming a bit corporate for me. There is no way I could run a big business. I mean, it had to be startup mode. The genius of O'Leary and Ryanair, it's still in startup mode in some ways. He is that's why that man, he's 20 times the size of Aer Lingus, and yet Aer Lingus is the big Goliath, and he's this cheeky startup, even though it's a colossal airline, biggest short-haul airline, and one of the biggest short-haul airlines in the world. And that is the genius of O'Leary, that he can manage that as well as being the cheeky upstart. I couldn't have done that. I was only a cheeky upstart. I was only a song and dance man. Even if I didn't have ADHD. And if I didn't have ADHD, I don't think my passion would be the way it is. I wouldn't have had these off-centre ideas. I wouldn't make it in the modern world, because we've become so politically correct. Political correctness is death. It's created Trump. It created Nigel Farage, this stupid woke political correctness.
Mhm.
It doesn't actually help the people. They supposedly it does. It kind of pities people more than helps them. You know, I think there's an incredible intellectual snobbery about the woke movement. Um, but I was you know, if I was brought to the present thing, I'd be an anti-woke warrior.
Mm.
Do I believe in Trump and Farage? No, they're horrible, evil people. But the woke movement created them. They made life so stupidly politically correct that tiny minorities were given more rights than normal working class people who got up in the morning and did a day's work.
I've heard you say before on another interview in preparation for this that sometimes you ask clients the question of what if you were to die in 5 years, and how would that maybe change what you were, what things you might change in the present. And it's a profound point for me. Like, I'm 37, but I've known people that were quite close to me that, you know, they were diagnosed with cancer at a very early age, and they were dead in 3 years, you know, and it's something that we don't really think about as humans, as to, you know, this is it, right? And you don't know when it's ending. And I'm wondering, did that factor into your thinking when you were making this change to psychotherapy?
It would have. It was a coach, David Scotland, who mentioned that concept, and I used it in psychotherapy and in coaching. So a client comes to you and is thinking of leaving his job, but a year later he's still thinking of leaving his job, and a year afterwards he's still thinking of leaving his job but doing nothing about it. And therefore, that's the time, because if you make a challenge and you make it too early, the client goes backwards, and that's no use. So you have to time any challenge to a client. So you wait and wait and wait till the right time, and that's an instinctual thing. So to ask them, right, you've been talking about this for 3 years, about leaving your job. If tomorrow you were told you had 5 years to live, you're probably of good health, but within the 5th or 6th year, the chances are you'll keel over for one reason or another. Well, how would that affect your thinking of leaving your job? Oh, I'd leave tomorrow morning. I said, well, then you've now made the decision. You know what's right. Go ahead. Because if you live your life, you say that you live your business life as if you're going to live forever. You live your personal life as if you're going to die tomorrow. Get close to all the people, say all the things you want to say to people now, not tomorrow, today, because you don't know if you're going to be around. And the 5 regrets of dying people that Ware, her surname was Ware, she's an Australian hospice nurse. You know, the regret, I worked too hard. I wasn't true to myself. I didn't pay enough attention and care to my friendships. I didn't express my emotions enough. I didn't let myself be happy enough. They're the 5 main regrets. And it's a book well worth reading. I kind of read it every few years just to recenter me, to see what is relevant. You don't have your business colleagues around your deathbed. You have your family. So which is the one that you cared about? One of the people there that she looked after was a man who always said he was going to retire very soon because I wanted to look after my wife, my wonderful wife. And he was on his deathbed basically, and he talked about, he always did intend, and then he came home one day and said to his wife, I'm retiring. And within a day, she had all the plans ready for a world trip. And he said, well, it's going to be, I'll give you the date, it's going to be next year. Mm. And 6 months later, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he never brought her on that world trip. And that is what he lived to regret for the rest of his life. And on his deathbed, that's what he regretted.
We're coming up on time now, so I just have one final question for you. And that's, what's your biggest regret?
Are you allowed to?
You are absolutely. I'd love to hear too if you're willing.
Uh, I think I would, on my huge regret that I didn't spend more time when my parents were getting elderly with them. Um, I did spend, I visited my mum when she went in on her own. She demanded to go into a nursing home rather than us looking after her. She didn't want to labour us too much with her life, but I visit her nearly every day, but I wish I'd spent more. I was more present when I was with her as well. With my dad, when he had a stroke, I wasn't really good. And the other one is I didn't do more about gambling addiction and study it more when I was CEO. And I think I would have left Paddy Power earlier, but I would have been in a position to lobby the government a lot better then as CEO to bring in legislation. This is only a legislation thing. Forget the bookies will not solve this problem. This is a legislation problem. So they're my two regrets.
Thank you so much for coming in, Stuart. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a huge amount from talking to you today, and wish you the best of luck with everything in the future.
Connor, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much.